The New York City summer was a physical assault, a wave of heat rising from the asphalt of the financial district in shimmering, dizzying lines. The air, thick with the scent of exhaust fumes and hot pavement, hung heavy between skyscrapers that clawed at a mercilessly blue sky. It was a world of sharp angles and mirrored glass, where success was measured in the decibels of a closing deal shouted into a phone and the silent glide of a luxury town car. Horns blared in a constant, impatient symphony, the soundtrack to a city that never stopped moving, never stopped wanting more. Down on the street level, amidst the sea of expensive suits and leather briefcases, life moved at a different pace. It was a world of invisible struggles, played out in the shadows of immense wealth, a place where survival was a quiet, desperate battle waged under the indifferent gaze of a million windows. Inside the climate-controlled sanctuary of her black Mercedes-Benz S-Class, Eleanor Vance was perfectly insulated from the city's oppressive heat and noise. At 29, she was the very picture of Wall Street success, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, no immaculate bun, her makeup a flawless mask of professional competence, and her designer suit a suit of armor. Her expression was one of cool, almost bored efficiency, her hands resting lightly on the steering wheel as she waited for the light to change. She was a prodigy, an heiress who managed her own hedge fund with a detached, analytical brilliance. Yet beneath the polished exterior, a profound emptiness had taken root. Her life was a meticulously curated sequence of transactions and acquisitions, a routine so perfect and predictable that it had numbed her to any real feeling, leaving her profoundly and utterly alone in a fortress of her own making. The traffic light ahead glowed a defiant red, bringing the river of steel to a temporary halt. Eleanor's Mercedes was first in line. A small figure emerged from between the cars, his worn sneakers silent on the scorching pavement. He was a boy, no older than 11, with sun-tanned skin and clothes that had seen far better days. He held a box of chocolate bars and tapped lightly on her window. Annoyed by the interruption, Eleanor pressed the button, lowering the tinted glass just an inch. Her dismissal already formed on her lips. But the boy spoke first, his voice clear and steady, devoid of any plea for pity. "Ma'am, would you buy a chocolate bar, please? My little sister hasn't eaten today." The words were not a beg. They were a statement of fact, a declaration of responsibility from someone who had shouldered a burden far too heavy for his small frame. The sentence pierced through the layers of her carefully constructed indifference, striking a place inside her she thought had long gone dormant. It was not about the chocolate or the money. It was the raw, unvarnished purpose in his young voice. He was not a problem to be ignored. He was a provider. In that moment, the glittering facade of her life, the portfolio, the penthouse, the endless acquisitions crumbled into dust, revealing the hollow space within. She saw a reflection of everything she was not, someone living for a reason greater than herself. Hot, unfamiliar tears blurred the image of the boy's earnest face, a silent testament to a lifetime of emotional neglect. The world outside faded away, and the only thing that mattered was the profound, aching truth in his words. It's moments like this, so simple and yet so powerful, that change everything. And if these stories touch you, subscribing is what allows us to keep bringing them to light. Ignoring the cacophony of angry horns that erupted behind her, Eleanor put the Mercedes in park. The world seemed to slow down, the frantic energy of Wall Street dissolving into a muted hum. She stepped out of the air-conditioned bubble of her car and onto the blistering pavement, the heat a shocking reality against her expensive leather shoes. Crouching down, she brought herself to Leo's eye level, the mask of corporate indifference completely gone, replaced by a raw, fragile vulnerability. Her voice, usually so firm and commanding, was now barely a whisper, thick with unshed tears. "Where is your family?" she asked. The question not just a request for directions, but a plea for entry into a world she had only ever observed from behind tinted glass. It was an impulsive, life-altering decision, a pivot away from a hollow existence towards something frighteningly real. Leo, unfazed by the chaos of the stalled traffic, simply nodded. He led her away from the main thoroughfare, his small frame navigating the crowded sidewalks with an expertise born of necessity. For Eleanor, it was like stepping into another country. The sterile scent of office buildings gave way to the rich, leisured smells of street food, overflowing dumpsters, and the sweet perfume of a nearby bakery. The sharp suits were replaced by a vibrant tapestry of everyday people, their faces etched with stories of struggle and resilience. She followed the boy, a silent observer in his world, her high heels clicking awkwardly on the cracked pavement. With every step, the carefully constructed walls of her life seemed to crumble further, leaving her exposed and uncertain, yet strangely more alive than she had felt in years. They arrived at a tired, brick tenement building, its facade weathered by decades of sun and neglect. The heavy front door groaned open into a dimly lit hallway that smelled of damp concrete and boiled cabbage. The air was thick and still, a stark contrast to the breezy, open spaces of her penthouse apartment. Sounds echoed from behind closed doors, a baby crying, a television blaring a game show, a heated argument in a language she didn't recognize. Leo led her up a narrow, winding staircase, the wooden steps creaking under her weight. This was not just a building, it was a vertical neighborhood, a place teeming with lives lived in close, desperate proximity. For the first time, Eleanor understood the sheer, physical weight of poverty, a suffocating pressure that was present in the very air she breathed. The door to their apartment was unlocked. Inside, a woman with Leo's same determined brown eyes looked up from a sewing machine, her face a mask of exhaustion and surprise. This was his mother, Maria. The small living room was tidy but threadbare, every object serving a purpose and with no room for luxury. Two younger children, a girl and a toddler, were playing quietly on a worn rug in the corner. When Maria saw Eleanor, her expression hardened instantly. She rose to her feet, her posture radiating a fierce, protective pride. She looked from her son to the impeccably dressed stranger, her mind racing to fill in the blanks, and the conclusion she reached was one of deep, ingrained suspicion. She saw not a potential savior, but a threat, a wealthy outsider coming to pass judgment on her life. Eleanor tried to explain, her words feeling clumsy and inadequate in the small, crowded room. She spoke of wanting to help, of ensuring the children had enough to eat, of finding a better solution than selling chocolates on a dangerous street corner. But her carefully chosen words landed like stones. Maria's suspicion quickly curdled into anger. "We don't need your charity," she said, her voice low but firm, each word a shield. "My son is not a beggar. He helps his family. We take care of our own." She saw Eleanor's offer not as kindness, but as an insult, a condescending gesture from a world that had always looked down on hers. The rejection was absolute, a wall of dignity that Eleanor's money and influence could not breach. The sting of that dismissal was sharper than any failed business deal. Eleanor stood there, momentarily stripped of her power, feeling the full force of Maria's pride. She saw that this woman's wealth was not in a bank account, but in her fierce love for her children and her unwavering refusal to be seen as a victim. It was a humbling, painful lesson in the complexities of human dignity. It's so hard to understand why someone might refuse help, but sometimes self-respect is the only thing a person has left. If you believe in the power of these human stories to teach us something profound, subscribing is the best way to help us continue sharing them. Eleanor left the apartment not with a sense of failure, but with a newfound respect and a deeper, more complicated resolve. As she walked back through the unfamiliar streets, the city lights beginning to blur around her. A ghost from her past rose to the surface. It was the memory of her younger brother, Daniel. It came not as a clear image, but as a series of painful sensory fragments. The sterile, chemical smell of a hospital room, the faint, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor, and the sight of her own small hand holding his skin feeling impossibly cool to the touch. He had been a quiet, gentle boy, and she, only a few years older, had been his fierce protector. But when he had gotten sick, her protection had meant nothing against the tide of her parents' ambition and neglect. Her parents had been titans of industry, their lives a whirlwind of meetings, international travel, and social obligations. Daniel's initial illness, a persistent fever and fatigue, had been dismissed as a common childhood ailment, an inconvenience in their meticulously scheduled lives. They threw money at the problem, hiring the best doctors, but they were never truly present, their minds always on the next acquisition, the next quarterly report. Eleanor remembered sitting by his bedside for hours, reading him stories while her parents were closing deals in another time zone. She carried the silent, suffocating guilt of a child who knew something was terribly wrong, but was powerless to make the adults listen, to make them see what was right in front of them. This encounter with Leo and his family had unlocked that sealed room in her heart. She suddenly understood that her desperate, impulsive need to help was not about them at all. It was about Daniel. It was a chance to finally do what she couldn't do as a child, to fight, to be present, to refuse to let another family be fractured by circumstances they couldn't control. This wasn't charity. It was a deeply personal quest for redemption. The realization settled over her, a heavy but clarifying weight. Having that moment where you finally grasp the true motivation behind your actions is a powerful turning point. Helping us share these journeys of self-discovery is as simple as subscribing to the channel. Her purpose was no longer vague, it was sharp, painful, and absolutely clear. A few days later, her resolve was tested. She received a hesitant call from a number she didn't recognize. It was Leo. His voice was small and tight with fear. His younger sister, Maya, the little girl she had seen playing on the rug, was sick. She had a high fever that wouldn't break, and a cough that rattled her small chest. Maria had been trying to manage it with home remedies and over-the-counter medicine, her distrust of the medical system and lack of insurance making her reluctant to seek professional help. The boy's words sent a chill down Eleanor's spine. The details were frighteningly familiar, an echo of the past she was so desperate to rewrite. This time, Eleanor approached differently. She didn't arrive with grand offers or pronouncements. She came with quiet competence. Using her connections, she arranged an appointment with a leading pediatric specialist, presenting it not as a command, but as a simple, precautionary measure. "Let's just have her checked to be safe," she told Maria over the phone, her tone calm and reassuring, betraying none of the panic churning inside her. She didn't offer money directly. Instead, she spoke of insurance plans her company offered, of navigating the complex paperwork, framing her help as logistical support rather than a handout. She was speaking Maria's language now, the language of a practical, determined problem solver. Slowly, cautiously, the wall of suspicion began to crack. Maria, seeing the genuine fear for her daughter reflected in another woman's eyes, and exhausted by her own worry, finally agreed. The doctor's visit was a blur of sterile white rooms and hushed, serious conversations. The initial diagnosis was grim. Maya had a severe and aggressive form of pneumonia, and it was complicated by an underlying, undiagnosed respiratory condition. She needed immediate hospitalization and a course of expensive, specialized treatments. The news landed like a physical blow, confirming Eleanor's worst fears. She was standing on the precipice of her own history, and the ghost of her brother felt closer than ever before. The hospital waiting room was a sterile, timeless purgatory, painted in shades of beige and illuminated by the cold, unforgiving hum of fluorescent lights. Time seemed to stretch and warp, each tick of the wall clock echoing like a hammer blow in the suffocating silence. Eleanor and Maria sat on opposite ends of a worn vinyl couch, two women from different universes, now bound together by the same agonizing thread of fear. Every distant beep, every hurried footstep in the hallway sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through them. Maria twisted a small, frayed tissue in her hands, her knuckles white, her lips moving in a silent, desperate prayer. Eleanor sat perfectly still, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. But inside, a storm of memories raged. The antiseptic smell of the room was a ghost, transporting her back decades to another hallway, another vigil, another life hanging precariously in the balance. After what felt like an eternity, a doctor in pale blue scrubs appeared in the doorway, his face etched with a professional calm that did little to soothe their frayed nerves. He spoke in measured tones, explaining that Maya's condition was still critical, but the specialized treatment, the one Eleanor had fought tooth and nail to secure, was beginning to work. It had stabilized her breathing, offering the first fragile glimmer of hope they had seen in days. The clinical explanation was a dam breaking for Maria. The fierce pride that had been her armor for so long shattered into a million pieces. A sob tore from her throat, a raw, ragged sound of a mother who had been pushed past the brink of endurance. She covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with the combined weight of terror, exhaustion, and a sliver of overwhelming relief. Through her tears, Maria finally looked at Eleanor, her eyes stripped of all suspicion, leaving only a raw, vulnerable gratitude. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice thick and broken. "I was so wrong about you. I thought I didn't understand." She shook her head, the words tumbling out in a rush of emotion. "You fought for my little girl. You didn't even know us, but you fought for her like she was your own. Why? Why would you do all of this for a family you met on the street?" The question hung in the sterile air, not an accusation, but a genuine, desperate need to comprehend an act of kindness so profound it defied all of her life's harsh lessons. It was a plea to understand the heart of the woman who had appeared so suddenly and changed everything. Eleanor's carefully maintained composure finally cracked, not with tears, but with a quiet, devastating honesty. She met Maria's gaze, and for the first time, she let someone see the wound she had carried for a lifetime. "I had a little brother," she began, her voice barely a whisper, each word a heavy stone pulled from the depths of her memory. "His name was Daniel. He got sick like Maya, but my parents, they were too busy. They didn't see how bad it was until it was too late." The story spilled out, not as a dramatic monologue, but as a simple, painful confession. "I sat with him. I held his hand. But I was just a child. I couldn't save my brother." She took a shaky breath, her eyes locking with Maria's. "But I won't let you lose your daughter. Neither of us is alone in this." The confession hung in the air between them, erasing the vast chasm of wealth and circumstance that had once separated them. In that moment, they were not a benefactor and a recipient. They were two women united by the universal terror of losing a child and the fierce, protective love that came with it. Maria finally understood. This wasn't charity. It was redemption. It was an act of profound empathy, born from a place of deep, personal pain. Slowly, she reached across the space on the couch and took Eleanor's hand. Her grip was firm, her calloused fingers wrapping around Eleanor's smooth ones. There were no more words needed. In the cold, impersonal waiting room of a city hospital, a new kind of family was forged, not by blood, but by a shared battle and the quiet, powerful healing of a long-overdue forgiveness. The weeks that followed were a quiet testament to the resilience of a child and the power of a second chance. Maya's recovery was slow but steady, each small milestone, a fever breaking, a cough subsiding, a first genuine smile, celebrated with a quiet, profound joy that filled the small hospital room. Eleanor was a constant presence, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a steadfast ally. She navigated the labyrinth of medical bureaucracy with the same ruthless efficiency she had once applied to the stock market, ensuring Maya received the best possible care. She brought groceries to the hospital for Maria and books for Leo, simple gestures that spoke volumes more than any check could. In those quiet hours, watching Maria read to her daughter, Eleanor realized her mission wasn't just about saving one child, it was about dismantling the very circumstances that had put her there, the systemic indifference that treated families like theirs as invisible. This realization sparked a radical transformation. Eleanor returned to her world of glass towers and financial reports not to resume her life, but to dismantle it. She liquidated a significant portion of her portfolio, the numbers on the screen no longer representing power, but potential. With the help of a small, dedicated team, she laid the groundwork for a new kind of enterprise, the Daniel Vance Foundation. It wasn't designed for handouts, but for hand-ups, a strategic organization dedicated to providing families with the three pillars of stability: safe housing, educational access, and a dedicated navigator for the complexities of the healthcare system. The first family they helped was really, of course, Leo's. They moved from the crumbling tenement into a bright, clean apartment in a safe neighborhood, a place where the children had their own rooms and homework was done at a proper table instead of the floor. Eleanor's life found a new, more meaningful rhythm. The severe bun was replaced by a looser, more relaxed style, and the designer suits were exchanged for practical, comfortable clothes. Her days were no longer a blur of frantic trades and high-stakes meetings, but a series of small, significant victories, securing a tutor for Leo, helping Maria find a stable job with benefits, celebrating a toddler's first steps on a playground that wasn't surrounded by city traffic. The profound emptiness that had once haunted her was filled, not with acquisitions, but with connection. She discovered a different kind of wealth, one that grew not from market fluctuations, but from the depth of human relationships. The return on her investment was measured in the sound of children's laughter and the look of relief on a mother's face, a currency far more valuable than anything traded on Wall Street. Years later, the foundation had become a beacon of hope for hundreds of families, a testament to the idea that empathy could be an actionable strategy. Eleanor was no longer just an heiress. She was a builder, constructing futures from the rubble of broken systems. She remained an integral part of Leo's family, an aunt in all but blood, there for every birthday and school play. She had not saved them. They had, in every meaningful way, saved her, pulling her from the gilded cage of her own making and showing her the true meaning of a life well lived. She had finally made peace with Daniel's memory, honoring him not with guilt, but with action. Sharing these journeys reminds us that anyone can be a catalyst for change, and your subscription is what helps us keep these powerful stories of hope alive for everyone.